The chamber is open and full of whispers.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive timelines, members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The owl was the wrong kind for Privet Drive. Large, tawny, and carrying 2 letters. That was the first thing Harry noticed. Not 1 letter. 2, he'd been standing at the kitchen sink washing the breakfast dishes while Dudley watched television in the next room, and Vernon read his newspaper with the focused hostility of someone determined to have a normal morning. The owl landed on the windowsill with a deliberate precision that made Harry stop breathing for a moment. Because owls did not land on windowsills in Surrey. They simply didn't. And yet here one was, looking at him with the patient composure of something that had accomplished its function and was waiting to see what he did about it. He dried his hands. He crossed to the window. Both envelopes were addressed in green ink on thick cream paper, the handwriting formal, looping, the kind that expected to be taken seriously. The first was for him. Harry James Potter, The Cupboard Under the Stairs, Number 4, Privet Drive, Little Winging, Surrey. The second was for someone named Hermione Jean Granger at an address in Oxford. Same owl, same morning. Different children. He stood at the windowsill for longer than was reasonable, looking from one envelope to the other. Something had shifted in the world. He could feel it without having words for it, the way you felt a weather change before the clouds arrived. Whatever this was, it had happened to 2 people simultaneously. He didn't know why that mattered, only that it did. He put both letters in the pocket of his oversized jeans. He took the emergency money Aunt Petunia kept in the kitchen drawer. She called it grocery money. But he'd found it was always there and always untouched, which meant it was really emergency money, and he walked to the bus stop without telling anyone. At the post office in Little Winging, he mailed Hermione Granger's letter. He confirmed her Oxford address with the clerk, who looked at him with the mild suspicion of adults confronted with unsupervised children conducting adult business, and Harry smiled and said nothing unusual. He paid the postage with Petunia's coins. Then he sat on a bench outside and opened his own letter. He had already guessed, more or less, what it would say. Children who grow up without explanations develop their own methods of understanding, and Harry had been building his model of the world since he was old enough to realize his model was wrong. He'd known something was different about him, not Dudley's different, not the teacher's whispered different. Something older and stranger and more his own. The owl was the confirmation he hadn't known he was waiting for. He read the letter twice. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. He was a wizard. There was a school for it. He had a place there beginning on the 1st of September. He folded it and put it back in his pocket and sat on the bench and watched a pair of pigeons argue over a chip wrapper and didn't move for a while. He was thinking about the second letter. About someone named Hermione Granger in Oxford who had received the same morning, the same owl, the same formal cream paper. About what it meant that 2 letters had arrived together rather than separately, as if the owl understood they belonged in the same moment. He went home and said nothing to anyone. 3 days into August, a small package appeared on the kitchen table at number 4 without arriving. One moment there was Vernon's newspaper and Dudley's empty cereal bowl. The next moment there was a parcel the size of a paperback book between them, sealed with dark wax bearing an embossed crest, addressed to both Harry James Potter and Hermione Jean Granger. Dual heirs by prophetic designation from the office of Director Ragnarok, Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Urgent and confidential. Harry was the only one awake. He took it to his room before anyone came downstairs, sat on the floor with the door locked, and opened it carefully. The letter inside was dense with formal language that took 3 full readings to understand. Gringotts had registered an event, a dual prophetic inheritance, defined as the simultaneous designation of 2 individuals as joint heirs to a magical prophecy of significant power, registered with the Ministry of Magic some years previously. The bank held independent records of the prophecy's contents. Both designated heirs were requested to attend Gringotts at the end of that same month for inheritance verification and a full briefing. At the very bottom, set apart from everything else in language somehow more urgent, the designation has been active since the night of October 1981. It has been accumulating for nearly 10 years. The heirs are advised that the complete briefing is time-sensitive. There are implications that require immediate awareness. Harry set the letter on the floor and looked at the ceiling. He thought about what it meant that a bank could know you were significant before you understood it yourself. He got up, found paper, and wrote to the address in Oxford. She was reading the letter while walking. That was the first thing Harry noticed about Hermione Granger. She appeared around the corner of Diagon Alley at 9:54 with the Gringotts letter open in one hand and a bag over her shoulder, and was navigating the cobblestones entirely by peripheral vision. When she reached the marble steps and saw him standing there, she stopped. She looked at the letter, then at him, then at the bank. "You're Harry Potter," she said. "Yes, the letter says we're dual prophetic heirs. That's what mine says too. I've been trying to work out what that means since the package arrived. I went to 3 libraries and found 2 references to compound prophetic structures in a specialist bookshop on Charing Cross Road." She put the letter in her bag. "Have you read anything on the subject? I didn't know there were specialist bookshops. There's one near Diagon Alley. I'd already found the alley before my Hogwarts letter even arrived." She looked at the bank with the frank appraisal of someone who'd already researched the building. "Shall we go in?" "Yes." Director Ragnarok received them in a chamber below the public counters, older than the front of the building, older than most of London, with walls carved in symbols that weren't decorative and wouldn't have been decorative in whatever era they'd been made. He sat behind a desk sized for goblins, which meant Harry and Hermione sat in chairs that were proportioned for humans but felt slightly ceremonial, like furniture chosen to communicate something rather than merely to seat people. He looked at them both for a long moment before he spoke. "You opened the package 3 days into August," he said. "Yes," Harry said. "Both of you. I received mine separately." "By owl," Hermione said. The package was designed to arrive simultaneously at both locations regardless of distance. The simultaneity was the first confirmation of the designation's activity. He made a notation in a ledger without looking at his hand, either impressive or alarming. "I will read the prophecy to you once. I ask that you listen rather than write. Written copies will be available after." He opened a second ledger and read without inflection. "Born of the old bond, one with the mark of death and one with the mind of stars, they come together as the Dark Lord has split asunder. Neither can possess the future while the other lives incomplete, and the Dark Lord's end will not come from one alone, but from the twin current of what was sacrificed and what was chosen. They will know each other at the moment of meeting. The power that he knows not is not singular but doubled, woven between them in a pattern that neither holds alone." He closed the ledger. Harry was very still. "The original prophecy addresses a single marked individual," Ragnarok said. "This is the companion prophecy, registered by a different seer 6 months after the first. The ministry classified it separately and never cross-referenced the 2 documents." He looked at Harry. "The ministry is not aware of the second prophecy. Gringotts alone holds it." "How does Gringotts have a prophecy?" Harry asked. "The seer came to us. She did not trust the ministry with what she had received." A pause. She was not wrong. "The twin current," Hermione said. "What does that mean practically?" "Exactly what it says. 2 currents woven together, constituting a power that neither of you holds separately." He looked at her. "The designation has been accumulating since October 1981. The mark of death is the scar on Mr. Potter's forehead. The mind of stars," he looked at Hermione, "you have demonstrated accidental magic since age 4 that is consistent with this designation. Not reactive magic. Magic that solves problems before formal training. Magic that appears to be already organized." She was quiet for a moment. "Why tell us now?" Harry asked. "Because the designation is not passive. You are both about to begin formal training, and training without awareness of what you carry would be deeply insufficient. He set his hands flat on the desk. There is something else. He opened a drawer and placed a single page on the desk between them, paper so old it had lost its color entirely. 6 lines remaining, the top half sheared away with deliberate cleanliness. Hermione reached for it before Harry did. She read it. Her expression shifted the way a mind shifts when it encounters something requiring the normal processing to stop and restart. She passed it to Harry. The 6 lines said, "The twin current cannot be severed once woven. Attempts to sever it will strengthen what they seek to end. The Dark Lord moves toward a trap of his own making if he targets one and not the other, but the trap only holds if neither knows it is a trap." "Someone in the Ministry sent this to you," Harry said. "Someone placed it in an envelope with no covering letter and sent it here rather than to either of you directly. This suggests they could not risk being seen to make contact." Ragnarok looked at the fragment with the careful attention he gave everything. "I do not know who sent it. I do not know whether they mean to help or to use what they know. What I do know is this: you are now aware of the designation. It has been active for nearly 10 years. And somewhere in the Ministry, someone has been aware of it longer than you have." He opened a third drawer and placed a small box on the desk. "There are family accounts in your name. Miss Potter, standard vault access. Miss Granger," he looked at her, "materials held in trust for you since 1981. The terms specified delivery upon prophetic designation activation. They've been here since before you were 4 years old." Hermione looked at the box. "Who left them?" she asked. "The trust was established anonymously. The materials are sealed. Only the designated heir can open them." She reached for the box. The seal dissolved the instant her fingers made contact, not gradually, immediately, the way locks opened for the right key rather than the wrong one. Whatever was inside had been waiting for exactly her hand on exactly this morning. Inside, a folded piece of parchment and a small carved stone the color of night sky. She read the parchment twice. Her face changed as she read, not dramatically, but completely. She folded it with the care you give something you're keeping, and placed it in her bag alongside the Gringotts letter and the pages of research notes she'd carried in from 3 libraries and a specialist bookshop. She picked up the carved stone and closed her fist around it. "We have 11 days before September," she said quietly. "Yes, I think we should use them." The bookshop on Charing Cross Road was called Cavendish and Strange. Hermione had found it in late July, before the Gringotts letter, while searching for books on magical theory after her Hogwarts letter had arrived, and she'd realized that ordinary libraries had their limits. She went back the day after the Gringotts meeting, with Harry and a precise list of what they needed. The woman behind the counter, Mrs. Strange, or someone who had taken the name professionally, was 60 and razor-sharp and looked at Hermione with the recognition of a recent customer, and at Harry with the look of someone who knew exactly who he was and had made a decision about that knowledge, which was apparently to say nothing and wait. "Prophetic designation theory," Hermione said. "Dual or compound prophecies specifically." "Restricted section," Mrs. Strange said. "We're designated heirs under an active compound prophecy. Gringotts confirmed it yesterday." Mrs. Strange studied them both for a long moment. Then she went into the back and returned with 3 texts, setting them on the counter. The first 2 are theory. The third is the only documented dual designation case in 3 centuries. She looked at Harry with a directness that suggested she'd been choosing when to say the next thing. "I knew your mother." "You did?" "She came here the summer before you were born, looking for something specific." She glanced at Hermione. She found it. The weight of what she wasn't saying sat in the room alongside what she had said. "Ask Gringotts. They have more than they showed you yesterday. Buy these. Read them in order." They bought them and read them that evening at Hermione's parents' kitchen table in Oxford, while her parents, Richard and Jean Granger, dentists, two people who had been navigating their daughter's extraordinary nature with the anxious good faith of people who genuinely wanted to understand, were at the practice. Richard Granger had, over the course of 3 dinners since the Hogwarts letter arrived, asked exactly the right questions, and then sat quietly with the answers, which was a rarer quality than it sounded. Jean Granger had gone to the library the next morning and returned with 4 books on child development that weren't relevant, but showed the right instinct. The texts confirmed what the Gringotts prophecy described. The medieval treatise contained one passage Harry returned to 3 times. The compound structure cannot be studied from outside. It can only be mapped from within, by the participants, who become simultaneously both instrument and cartographer. Mrs. Strange's back room also contained, inserted loose into the medieval treatise, a single page that was too new for the book holding it, the paper crisp, the ink recent. It said, "You are looking in the right place. The methodology your benefactor left is correct. Begin with exercise 3, not exercise 1. The order matters. No signature." "Someone put this here after we came in yesterday," Hermione said. "Mrs. Strange knew what we were looking for. She knew your mother. She said so." Hermione set the page beside the methodology parchment. "Someone is helping us. Indirectly, the same way the Gringotts fragment was indirect." "The same person?" "Or a network," Harry said. "People who knew your mother and have been maintaining things since she died." He looked at the shop's walls, the dense collection not available to ordinary customers. She built things, not just in the vault and the trust. She built networks of people. She trusted specific people, carefully, and built systems that would hold even after she was gone. Hermione held his gaze. That's a specific kind of intelligence. The kind that plans for its own absence. She was quiet for a moment. She was 21 years old when she built all of this, and she did it while running from the most dangerous dark wizard of the century. What does that tell us? That the work we're being asked to do is manageable by comparison, she said simply, and that we have no excuse not to do it well. Hermione had been annotating her copy for over an hour when she looked up. "The parchment from the trust materials," she said. "Your mother called what she'd designed the cartography of the between. A methodology for 2 people to map what exists between them when they share a prophetic designation." She set her pen down. She designed it, but never had the chance to test it. We're the only people who can. What does it involve? Trust, and a series of exercises. Situations designed to require reading each other without communication. She spread the parchment flat on the table between them. She wrote that the twin current isn't something we generate. It already exists. We're the instruments, not the source. She paused. She compared it to 2 tuning forks at the same frequency. Strike one, and the other vibrates without being touched. The current is the air between them. It already exists, Harry said. It's been waiting for us to meet. The Potter family vault sat at a depth that communicated deliberate significance, not the deepest in Gringotts, but well below the tourist vaults, in the section where the magic in the walls ran cooler and quieter, and had been doing so for a very long time. The locksmith goblin who rode down with them was named Griphook, meticulous and professionally silent, who watched Harry press his palm to the blood-sealed chest inside, with the expression of someone confirming a hypothesis they'd held for some time. The lock dissolved. Inside the chest, a wand, shorter than standard, the wood dark and old. A leather journal, soft with handling, the cover worn in the way of something that had been frequently read. And a small portrait of a woman with red hair and green eyes. She was already awake. She looked at Harry for a long moment. Then at Hermione. "You found her," Lily Potter said. Not surprise. Relief. Distinct and specific, with the quality of someone who'd built something and was now watching it work. "Did you expect?" Hermione began. I left things for both of you. Harry's are here. Yours are at Gringotts, in the trust. She looked at Hermione with an attention that was almost scientific, assessing whether what she'd built had held together correctly. You've opened them. Yes, the note explained some of it. It explained what I could write in the time I had. She turned to Harry. I don't have long in a conversation. Portrait magic is limited, and I built this one quickly. I need you to listen. We're listening, Harry said. The second prophecy, I found it. A month before you were born. I had it registered at Gringotts rather than the Ministry because I didn't trust the Ministry with it. She held his gaze. I didn't understand the full implications until after Halloween of 1981. I prepared things in case you both survived. Both of you. Both, Hermione said quietly. The Granger family came to my attention when Hermione was 9, through monitoring systems I set up before I died. She said this without flinching, established fact. Not confession. I'd set alerts tied to Gringotts rather than the Ministry. If both designated heirs survived and reached their 11th year, the bank would activate the trust and send the letter. I didn't know if either of you would survive. I prepared things as if both of you might. The wand in the chest is mine, she continued. It won't work for you, it's keyed to my magical signature, but it holds a record of every significant spell I performed in my last year. The journal explains the technique for reading it. She looked at Hermione. The methodology in your trust materials, I developed it theoretically. I never had the chance to test it. I need you to promise me something. Neither of them spoke. The person who sent the Ministry fragment to Gringotts. When you find out who it was, and you will, the trail is there if you know what you're looking for. Don't assume they're entirely trustworthy. They're not entirely untrustworthy either. There's someone who has been carrying this knowledge at significant personal cost, and the weight has compromised their judgment. She looked at Harry directly. They love you. That doesn't make them right. Dumbledore, Harry said. He found the Ministry archive fragment a year after Halloween. He's been waiting for what he believes is the right moment to use it. He knows a second prophecy exists but doesn't have its contents. She was beginning to fade, the portrait magic reaching its limit. He thinks you're the center. He doesn't know about Hermione. He'll figure it out eventually, Hermione said. When you arrive at Hogwarts, yes, which is why you need to establish your working relationship before that happens. Understand the designation from the inside before he begins managing it from the outside. She was translucent now, the magic thinning at its edges. Read the journal in order. The last entry explains what I believe the twin current actually is, below all the prophetic language. I couldn't finish it before. She was gone. A painted woman with red hair, still, having said everything it had been holding for 10 years. Griphook stood at a respectful distance with the expression of someone who had seen many vaults opened and understood that what happened inside them was not his business. Harry looked at the portrait. She planned for us, Hermione said. Specifically, in 1981. Yes, she left you a wand record of her last year and left me a methodology and set up monitoring systems and registered a prophecy at a private bank rather than the Ministry. She picked up the journal. All of it, in the months before she died, while running from the most dangerous dark wizard of the century, while raising a baby, while watching people she loved die around her. She knew it was coming. She knew it was possible, Hermione said. There's a difference. She opened the journal's first page. She was 21 years old, the same age she died, the same age she built all of this. 11 days, Harry said. Then we should start now. The journal's first entry was written 16 days before Halloween of 1981. Lily Potter's handwriting in the early pages was careful, the handwriting of someone writing for a future reader, with the deliberate clarity of someone who understood that their voice, face, and context would not be there to explain the gaps. Harry read it at Hermione's kitchen table in the early morning while she annotated the methodology parchment beside him, her tea gone cold, untouched. The first entry explained the wand record technique. The second entry described a layered project, understanding the second prophecy, understanding what it meant for two children not yet born or chosen, and building a framework for when those children would be old enough to need it. The third entry made Harry stop and look at the wall for a while. It was written the morning after James died, November the 1st. The handwriting was not careful. It was rapid, uneven, written for herself rather than any reader, in the hours when she didn't yet know how few hours she had left. He read it once. He folded the journal to that page and set it on the table. Hermione, she looked up. The November 1st entry. She read it. She set the journal down. She chose to stay, she said. She could have run. With me. She'd read enough. She knew what a willing sacrifice created. She chose it deliberately, knowing you'd survive, and she wouldn't. Hermione was very still, and in the time she had before that night, she'd already set up everything that would eventually lead two 11-year-olds to find each other in a bank with a goblin explaining prophetic designations. She looked at the journal. Every piece of preparation built toward that one morning at Gringotts. 10 years of planning that started the night before I was a year old. Yes, she picked up her pen. I find that clarifying. About what? About what people are capable of. When it matters. She looked at the journal. What's in the last entry? The one she said she couldn't finish? He turned to the last pages with writing, dated 3 days before the end. 5 pages long, stopping mid-sentence. He read it aloud to her, because reading it that way felt more accurate than simply handing it over. It was a thing meant to be heard as much as read. He could feel that in the rhythm of it, the way certain sentences were constructed not to be scanned silently, but to be spoken. To live in air rather than on paper. His mother's last entry was about the twin current, not as prophetic language, but as a theoretical framework she'd been developing for a year, working from magical theory texts, her own experimental results, and the second prophecy's precise wording. She'd been testing it alone, without James knowing the full scope, because the scope would have frightened him in ways that weren't useful to anyone. She had written, in one of the middle pages, James would want to protect me from this. He would be wrong to, not because the risk isn't real, but because the protection would cost us the preparation. And the preparation is everything. Harry paused at that line when he reached it. He didn't comment. He kept reading. The twin current, she wrote, was not a power the two designated heirs would develop. It was a structure that already existed in the magical world, created by the conditions that produced the prophecy, waiting for the two specific people to meet and activate it. She used an analogy, 2 tuning forks at the same frequency, separated across a room. Strike one and the other vibrates without being touched, the resonance moving through air rather than direct contact. The twin current was the air. It already existed. The airs were the forks. And then the sentence that didn't finish, I believe the twin current is not a form of power, but a form of. Harry stopped reading. A form of what? Hermione said. She didn't get to write it. The kitchen was quiet. Knowing, Hermione said. He looked at her. I believe the twin current is not a form of power, but a form of knowing, she said. She was going to write knowing, or understanding, something in that register. She set her pen down and looked at him steadily. The power that Voldemort knows not. Everyone calls it love. But that's not quite precise, is it? He doesn't understand love, but that's a lack of comprehension, a different category of lack than power. He operates as a singular entity. Every decision, every action, every piece of authority entirely his, concentrated, self-contained. He genuinely cannot access anything that exists between two people rather than within one person. He doesn't have the framework for it. The twin current exists between us, Harry said. Not inside either of us. Between us. in the space he has never once occupied because he has no genuine relationships, only extraction and control. She picked up her pen again. The power he knows not isn't love as an emotion, it's love as a relational structure. The capacity to build something in the space between two people. He has no access to that space. Harry sat with this. My mother understood this. She was building toward understanding it. She got very close. Hermione looked at the unfinished sentence. We need to test it. How? Exercise 3. She turned to the methodology parchment. We each describe what we believe the other person is thinking right now, in writing, without consulting each other. Then we compare. She tore a page from her notebook and handed it to him. They wrote simultaneously without looking at each other. Harry wrote, "She's thinking about the network, who helped Lily, who's still helping now, and about exercise 1 and why the note in the back room says to skip it. And she's thinking about the unfinished sentence." Hermione wrote, "He's thinking about his mother's handwriting on that November morning, about whether he trusts this process, and whether he can." They exchanged papers. "You're not wrong," she said. "Neither are you." The exercise description says, when accuracy exceeds chance, the current is active. She set the papers on the table and looked at them. We scored considerably better than chance. Yes, she wrote it in her notebook, in the precise script she used for significant findings. He watched her write and thought about 2 tuning forks, and the air between them and the sentence his mother had not gotten to finish. He thought, a form of knowing. He looked at what she'd written about him, that he was thinking about his mother's handwriting, about trust, about whether he could. And it was accurate not as inference, but as direct apprehension, not a guess, a known thing. "How long has this been active?" he asked. "The designation has been accumulating since October 1981. But the current itself, I think the prophecy designated us specifically because the current already existed in potential. The conditions created the heirs rather than the other way around. We were always going to be this, some version of this." She looked at exercise 4. 11 days. Platform 9 3/4 on the 1st of September had the quality of a place that knew what it was for. Harry stood on it for the first time and felt the weight of arrival. Not the train's arrival, but his own, the first time he'd been somewhere that expected his existence, rather than tolerated it. The families around him moved with the ease of people for whom this was an annual event. He was the only person on the platform for whom it was happening for the first time. He was less overwhelmed than he'd expected. The 11 days with Hermione had recalibrated his sense of what first times felt like. She was already there, near the middle carriages, trolley packed with the precision of someone who'd thought carefully about every item. She registered him at roughly the same moment he saw her. Something in the current warming before his eyes confirmed who he was looking at in the crowd. Neither of them performed surprise. "Second to last carriage," she said when he reached her. "There's a compartment that'll stay empty." "Why? It feels like somewhere serious work happens. Most 11-year-olds want somewhere more comfortable." "That's useful." "I thought so." The compartment was exactly as she'd described. Sitting across from each other with the platform still visible through the window, Harry felt the designation respond to the magical environment with more immediacy than at any point outside the exercises. It was like a radio signal suddenly finding a clearer frequency. "The air is different here," he said. "Yes, we crossed into Hogwarts' sphere of influence when we passed through the barrier. The current isn't dormant anymore, it's reading everything, like it's been waiting for this kind of environment." She set the methodology parchment on the seat beside her. "Your mother noted one exercise specifically requires a significant magical environment to run properly. We've never been in the right conditions until now." She tore 2 pages from her notebook and handed one to him. They wrote simultaneously without looking at each other. Harry wrote, "It's organizing, like water finding a container's shape. The environment is the container, and the current is learning what it holds in here. Hermione wrote, responsive, actively reading everything the way I read a text, taking in information, cross-referencing. It's not passive in a magical environment, it becomes a working instrument. They exchanged. Both things can be true simultaneously, she said. The current is actively reading the environment, and the environment gives it a shape it carries into ordinary spaces. She was already writing the cross-reference in her notebook. This matters. The designation won't be dormant at Hogwarts. It'll be continuously active, which means Dumbledore may sense it. Almost certainly. Especially during the sorting. The hat reads minds, reads magical character. If it encounters either of us while the current is this present, it'll find it. She pulled the journal out. Your mother left a note about the hat specifically. The hat reads what is present. You cannot hide what is present. But presence is not the same as explanation. The hat will find the current. It will not know what the current is unless you tell it. You don't have to tell it. We let it sort us and don't explain the designation, Harry said. Yes, she looked at him. What house do you think you'll be sorted into? I'm not certain yet. I've been thinking Gryffindor or Ravenclaw. Both fit what the methodology's shown so far. She paused. It may not matter as much as the house system implies. The twin current doesn't split along house lines. Whatever houses we end up in, the bond continues. The train began to move. Ron Weasley found the compartment despite its atmosphere. He slid the door open with the look of someone who'd walked the entire train and was making peace with what remained. He took in Harry, then Hermione, and appeared to reach a verdict. Is there room? Yes, Harry said. Ron sat down and introduced himself with the genuine warmth of someone who actually enjoyed meeting people. Not performed openness, but real curiosity. He had red hair, freckles, and slightly second-hand robes that suggested a large family and a relaxed relationship with inheritance. He looked at Harry with the frank recognition of someone who'd grown up hearing 6 different versions of the same legend. You're Harry Potter. Yes, I have 5 older brothers. They've all told me different things about you. Bill says you're a symbol. Charlie says you're probably just a kid. Fred and George reckon you must be brilliant. Percy's written a 12-page essay about Hogwarts receiving you. Ron considered. Percy is like that. What do you think? Harry asked. I think the truth is probably somewhere between all of them. He grinned. Also that Fred and George will be insufferable if they're right. He looked at Hermione. Are you famous too? No, that's probably easier. In some ways, she said. Ron pulled out homemade food, the kind made in a household where cooking was an act of care, sandwiches wrapped in cloth rather than cling film, a tin of biscuits with slightly dented edges from being carried. He shared without being asked. Harry, who had not had food given to him without calculation since he could remember, accepted it and noticed something ease in his chest. Neville Longbottom appeared midway through the journey looking for a toad. His name is Trevor, Neville said with the resigned tone of someone who'd accepted this particular cross. He doesn't like the train. Try 3 compartments down, Hermione said, not looking up from her methodology parchment. Toads have strong homing instincts. He's likely found the lowest heat source on this level. He was. Neville came back 15 minutes later looking genuinely lighter and stayed to talk. Because Ron had given him a chess piece to hold during the search, and it turned out Neville liked chess, and Ron liked teaching chess, and the two of them fell into a game on the fold-out table while the English countryside moved past outside. The trolley witch came. Harry bought one of everything. He'd never been allowed to before. Hermione read through the methodology parchment during the exploding snap game that eventually replaced the chess. Ron watched her annotating with the casual acceptance of someone who had categorized this as simply something she did, like the way Percy read rulebooks on holidays. The castle arrived at night, across a lake. Harry and Hermione shared a boat with Neville, gripping the sides with both hands, watching the water with focused distrust, and a first-year girl named Ginny Weasley, who had narrowly made the last boat and was pretending she hadn't nearly panicked about it. The castle came out of the dark above the water. Harry felt the current respond, not gradually, the way it had responded to the train's journey, but all at once, like a compass needle moving when it found north. He looked at Hermione. "Something in the foundations recognizes the current," she said, very quietly, just to him. "Hogwarts has been waiting for the designation to activate. It's in the architecture." She looked at the towers rising above the lake. "Your mother built something into this castle, too." "How do you know?" "The current just told me." She said it the way she reported empirical findings, precisely, without drama. "I'll need to verify it." But the response to approaching the castle is recognition, the kind you feel when something built for a purpose finally encounters what it was built for. "She was here for 7 years," Harry said. "She left something here for us." The boats touched the bank. Professor McGonagall met them at the castle entrance with the practiced authority of someone who had managed 40 years of first arrivals and found the ritual necessary precisely because it was always the same. She looked across the assembled students with the eye of someone taking inventory and paused, almost imperceptibly, when her gaze reached Harry and Hermione standing together. Not surprise. Recalculation, inside, the castle's magic pressed against the current with a directness that was different from anything Harry had felt before. Not ambient, but specific, directed at both of them simultaneously. Something embedded in the stone walls was actively responding to their presence together, not separately. His mother had built a waiting room. The sorting hat went on his head and found the current in under 3 seconds. Well, it said, in the private register meant only for the student wearing it. "I haven't seen this before." "I know," Harry thought. "This is not a single designation. This is a dual, yes, a pause, unusual for something that had processed 1,000 years of sorting and had long since streamlined the work." "You know what you are," the hat said. "I'm learning. She knows too." The other one. "Yes, you've been working on it. 11 days. Something moved through the hat's ancient attention that Harry could only describe afterward as respect. "Where should I put you?" Harry thought about what the next 7 years required. Not ambition, not cleverness, not loyalty, though he had all 3 to varying degrees. He thought about his mother on the last night of her life, about a woman who faced something enormous without flinching, about the kind of courage that wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act alongside it. Gryffindor, he thought, because that's where the courage is, and courage is what the next 7 years will need more than anything else. Gryffindor. The hat announced. The table erupted. Fred and George Weasley started rhythmic clapping that Percy tried to stop, and absolutely failed to stop. A boy named Seamus Finnegan pumped Harry's hand like a water pump. Dean Thomas slid down to make room. Harry sat. 2 minutes later, Hermione sat on the stool. 41 seconds passed. The room's attention sharpened, from routine interest to the particular focus of people watching something take longer than expected. Neville Longbottom, still waiting to be called, leaned forward slightly. Even Draco Malfoy, already settled at the Slytherin table with the comfort of someone who'd considered his place there a foregone conclusion, looked up from his conversation. Gryffindor. She walked to the table and sat beside Harry. 41 seconds, he said. "I had a conversation. About the current? About the current. About what the next 7 years require. And about something the hat found in the castle's structure that I need to discuss when we're somewhere without 300 people watching us." She picked up her fork as food appeared. "Your mother definitely built something into this castle." The waiting room. The hat described it as a space built to hold something in suspension until the designated heirs arrived at Hogwarts for the first time, a specific configuration of a room on the 7th floor. She looked at him. "It's been holding the 3rd prophecy. There are 3 of them, Harry," he set his fork down. 3, he said. Apparently, across the great hall, at the staff table, Albus Dumbledore was watching them both with the expression of a man whose long-held theory had just been simultaneously confirmed and revealed as incomplete. Harry met his gaze for a moment, then looked away. The dungeons had been arranged by someone who understood that a space communicated expectations before a single word was spoken. The potions classroom, work tables positioned to discourage easy collaboration, ingredient shelves calibrated for someone taller than most students, the kind of room where mistakes had immediate visible consequences. Severus Snape entered it with the economy of someone entirely at home in his own domain, and read the first-year class the way Harry had been learning to read rooms, systematically, inventorying. He read Harry with something complicated. He read Hermione with something sharper. He called on Harry first. "Mr. Potter, tell me, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" The draught of living death, Professor, one of the most powerful sleeping potions ever created. A pause. "Where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar?" "The stomach of a goat. It acts as an antidote to most poisons." "And what is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane?" "There is no difference. They're the same plant, also called aconite." Snape's expression at 3 consecutive correct answers was more revealing than displeasure would have been, not anger. Recalculation. The landscape of the day had shifted in a way he hadn't anticipated. He moved on. The class proceeded with the precision of someone who understood that demanding standards were not the same as cruelty, though they could be made to resemble it when useful. Neville's cauldron began producing smoke halfway through, and Snape's response made the problem worse rather than better. Harry watched Hermione's jaw tighten fractionally, once, controlled, before she looked back at her own cauldron. He filed it. When Hermione answered a question about aconite's secondary properties with an accuracy that exceeded the first-year textbook, Snape kept her behind after class. Harry waited in the corridor. She came out 2 minutes later. He asked where I'd learned the secondary property detail. "It isn't in the textbook. Where did you learn it?" "Cavendish and Strange. Mrs. Strange let me read an advanced text there over the summer, but wouldn't let me take it." She paused. "He didn't believe me when I said I couldn't remember the title. Does it matter?" "It matters that he noticed something in the classroom's magical environment. He doesn't know what the current is, but he felt it active during class. He's going to watch us." She opened her notebook. "Which means we need to decide what our working relationship with him looks like." Harry went back to the potions classroom alone that afternoon. Snape was marking at his desk and looked up without welcome. "Potter, Professor." Harry stopped at the right distance, not so far as deference, not close enough to suggest confrontation. "I wanted to understand the principle behind the aconite question. Why the secondary properties affect preparation rather than just the primary ones." Snape set down his pen. "That is not a question a student asks unless they've read considerably past the first-year curriculum. I had time over the summer. Your father was not interested in potions. I know. Your mother was exceptional at it. I know that too. A silence that held a wound in it. The current read Snape as 2 nearly equal qualities in active opposition, the specific weight of a decision made long ago and maintained at significant cost, and beneath it, grief, not abstract grief, the kind that was specific and personal and never fully diminished. Why are you here, Potter? The real reason. Because potions is a subject I intend to take seriously, and taking it seriously means taking you seriously. I don't want the first month of term to establish a pattern that makes the next 7 years harder for both of us." Snape looked at him for a long time. "That is a remarkably adult sentence for an 11-year-old. I've had a productive summer. I'm aware." He paused. Something in the magical environment of this castle changed on September the 1st. Something dormant activated. He picked up his pen. I would be a poor observer not to notice. We noticed it too, Harry said. We, Hermione and I. Snape said nothing for a moment. When he spoke again, he chose his words with the care of someone who had spent a long time thinking about what he was and was not permitted to say. Your mother was specific about what she trusted me to know, and what she trusted me to hold without explanation. He looked at the desk. She did not tell me everything. She was correct not to. He looked up. Whatever you find on the 7th floor, be patient with it. It was built under pressure, and it carries that. Don't engage with it in haste. You know about the 7th floor. I know something is there. I don't know what. He paused. I've been keeping students away from that specific location for a decade without being able to explain why they should stay away. Because she asked you to. Because she asked me to. He returned to his marking with the finality of someone ending a conversation on their own terms. Your potion's work will be assessed on its merits alone, Potter, nothing else. You're dismissed. Thank you, Professor. In the corridor, Hermione was waiting. He keeps his word, she said when Harry had relayed the conversation. She trusted him with something she couldn't explain, and he's been honoring it for 10 years. The truce holds. He's already in it, he just doesn't know what it's called. Yes. She closed her notebook. Which means it's real. And that's exactly why it'll work. The incident at the Gryffindor table happened at lunch 3 days into term. Harry had not expected it, which was itself a finding about the current's limitations. It was not precognitive. It didn't anticipate events that hadn't yet been set in motion. What it registered was people, their qualities, their intentions as they manifested in proximity. It read Draco Malfoy as a specific type of person before Malfoy had opened his mouth. Someone whose sense of his own importance was structurally connected to the management of other people's importance. Other people being significant without his permission was a condition he would act to correct. Malfoy approached the Gryffindor table at lunch with the ease of someone who had been the most significant person in every room he'd entered for 11 years, and saw no reason this room should differ. Potter. He said it the way he'd said it on the train, not a greeting. An opening move. I've been thinking about what I said about the right sort. I think you've made an error. I don't think I have, Harry said. Malfoy's attention moved to Hermione. It rested on her with the calculating quality of someone assessing a threat level, determining how much management was required. Granger, he said it with the particular emphasis that communicated he had looked her up and was reporting what he'd found. Muggle-born. Hermione did not look up from the text she was reading beside her lunch plate. It's traditional to respond when someone's speaking to you, Malfoy said. She looked up. She looked at him with the expression Harry had come to recognize as her at maximum attention, not unkind, but genuinely uninterested in performing interest she didn't have. I've been reading about the history of blood status ideology in Wizarding Britain, she said. Would you like me to summarize what I found, or is this going to be a short conversation? Excuse me? I ask because the history is actually quite interesting, and if you're curious, I'd enjoy discussing it. If you're here to tell me that my parents being Muggles makes me less capable than you, I already know that's what you think, and it won't take long to tell you you're wrong. Malfoy's expression went through several adjustments. The blood status belief system traces to the 1400s, Hermione continued, when a small number of old wizarding families began codifying oral traditions into written doctrine that served their political interests. That doctrine has been revised 11 times since then, each time in response to evidence that contradicted the previous version. She turned a page. None of the 11 versions has withstood empirical scrutiny. Magical ability distributes across blood status without meaningful correlation. The Gryffindor table had gone quiet. The most cited study supporting the blood status doctrine was published in 1887 and has been discredited on methodological grounds by 4 separate analyses since 1920. It's still cited because it supports a conclusion that certain families prefer, not because it holds up. She looked at him with something approaching genuine interest. I'm happy to loan you the sources. I've annotated them. Malfoy looked at Harry with the expression of someone searching for an ally in a situation that had gone unexpectedly sideways. You're going to let her? She's not doing anything that requires my involvement, Harry said. Malfoy recalibrated. The current read it clearly. Someone encountering an approach that their existing framework didn't have a response to. He'd arrived with a script, and the script had not been useful. This isn't over, he said, and left. The Gryffindor table's quiet resolved into normal lunch noise. That was, Ron started. He has a belief system he hasn't examined critically, Hermione said. It's not unusual at 11. It might become more entrenched, or it might not, depending on whether anyone ever provides contrary evidence in a form he can engage with. She picked up her fork. I provided it in a form he can engage with. Do you think he will engage with it? I don't know, but now he's heard it. That's different from not having heard it. Harry watched Malfoy return to the Slytherin table. Through the current's extended reading, less detailed at distance but still present, he could feel the processing happening, someone encountering an argument they couldn't immediately counter, which was not the same as being convinced. But it was not nothing. The writing appeared on a wall in the middle of their second October at Hogwarts. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the heir, beware, below the words, Mrs. Norris, stiff and silver-eyed, petrified where she'd been standing. Harry kept walking. He found Hermione in the library at 7 a.m. She had 4 books open and the particular stillness of someone who'd been at work for hours before anyone else arrived. The Chamber of Secrets, she said before he'd sat down. A sealed chamber built by Salazar Slytherin, containing a creature intended to purge Muggle-born students from the school before he departed. Legend says it can only be opened by his heir. So someone here is claiming that designation, Harry said. Or actually holds it. They're different things. And the current's response this morning matches what we felt with Quirrell last year, but not exactly. She pulled one book toward her. Last year was a wrong presence inside a person. This morning reads as a wrong presence inside an object. An object designed to form relationships, to find vulnerability and speak directly to it. Someone gave it to a student who doesn't know what they're carrying. Yes, someone who is being used rather than using. Harry had been hearing a voice in the walls since September, moving, cold, traveling through the castle's plumbing in a direction that followed no visible logic. He told her now. Parseltongue, she said. You're hearing the creature through the pipes. She looked at him steadily. You can speak to it. I know. We find the object first. The creature is following instructions, and so is whatever student is carrying the object, whether they know it or not. The investigation lasted 6 weeks. Systematic, quiet. The current's readings cross-referenced each evening against observable evidence, and Hermione's research in the library's most obscure corner, where Madame Pince had long since stopped asking them to keep their voices down, because they always already were. By the 3rd week, Harry could feel something wrong near Ginny Weasley. Not threat, not guilt, but the same signature they'd identified from the morning of the attack, distributed through a person rather than concentrated in an object. Ron needed to know. They told him in the common room on a Wednesday evening. They brought evidence, specific documented observations, cross-referenced against Hermione's research, arranged so he could examine the logic rather than simply be asked to trust them. The first 3 minutes were denial, the particular kind mounted by someone who had genuinely loved what they were being asked to reframe. The next 4 minutes were the working through of logic that didn't want to be followed. The final 3 minutes were silence. She doesn't know she's doing it, does she? Ron said. It wasn't a question. No, Hermione said. She loses time. She's frightened of herself. The object she's been corresponding with presents itself as something that understands her, the most effective manipulation available. We get the object without hurting her, Ron said. Without telling anyone else yet, either, Harry said. If Dumbledore gets involved, he sees a perpetrator rather than a victim. The object disappears into Ministry evidence, and whatever fragment of Voldemort is stored inside it gets handled by people who have no context for what they're dealing with. Ron looked at them both. Then what are we doing? We go in, Harry said. The entrance is in Myrtle's bathroom. The chamber was vast and carved and had the specific chill of spaces sealed for a very long time. The air dense with preserved intention, something that had been waiting down here with nothing to do for 1,000 years. The basilisk came first as sound, a movement too large for its noise. The acoustic signature of something enormous moving with great deliberate care. I'm not here to command you, Harry said in Parseltongue. The movement stopped. I know what you've been doing and why you've been doing it. I'm not here to ask you to continue. You speak the language, the basilisk said. Yes, you speak it as a question, not a command. Yes, the others who came spoke it as a command. The founder, long ago. And recently, a voice from a small dark thing. It knows the words, but not the weight. The twin current extended outward. Harry felt it reach, felt Hermione anchor from somewhere behind him, her steady presence at the other end of the bridge. The small dark thing has been using you, he said. Yes, you knew it was wrong. I am bound. I knew and could not refuse. I can release the binding, but it requires your consent. A long silence. My consent, the basilisk said. Yes, the founder did not ask for consent. I know. The voice from the dark thing never asks for consent. I know that too. Another pause, longer than any before. Then, I consent. What happened next had no name Harry knew. The current extended fully, carrying something built through 14 months of the cartography methodology, not raw power, but the capacity that existed between them rather than within either of them. The thing his mother had named in her last incomplete sentence. Hermione held the anchor, and he extended the bridge, and the bridge reached the binding that had held a living creature to a wrong purpose for 1,000 years. The binding dissolved. The basilisk moved, not toward them, but toward the chamber's far end, orienting itself the way a released thing orients, learning what it is without what it had been carrying. The small dark thing, it said. Harry held out his hand on instinct. A small black diary fell from the chamber wall, its ink bleeding through the cover in irregular pulses. The consciousness inside diminished now that the command structure that sustained it was severed. He picked it up. He could feel the fragment through the current, small, thin, desperate. The fang, he said. I have it, Hermione said from behind him. He drove it through the cover. The ink bled black, then gray, then absence. When Harry turned, the basilisk had returned to the chamber's far end, enormous head oriented toward them with the sensory apparatus that wasn't sight. You're free, Harry said. What do I do now? It asked. What do you want to do? A very long pause. Ron, who had been silent through all of this with the particular frozen composure of someone who had decided to simply hold very still, let out a slow breath. I want to live somewhere that does not ask me to harm, the basilisk said. Then this chamber is yours until you find one. We'll come back, if you want to be found. The twin current, the basilisk said. I felt it when you released the binding. It is old, older than the language. I remember the shape of it. What do you remember? That it was supposed to come, that the binding was wrong and would eventually be addressed by the right speakers. A pause. The founder told me many things. One of the true ones was, eventually, the right speakers will come. We came, Harry said. Yes, the basilisk said. You came. Near the end of their second year, Ministry owls arrived at Hogwarts in cluster formation, the tight-grouped flight of birds carrying official urgency, and Harry watched them from the astronomy tower at dusk and felt through the current what was coming before any announcement was made. Sirius Black had escaped from Azkaban. He found Hermione in the library. She had been there since breakfast, 4 texts open, a notebook already half filled. The Peverell Archives account of November 1981, she said when he sat down. The night Peter Pettigrew died in Muggle London. Sirius was laughing, Harry said. 12 Muggles dead. The Ministry arrested him. The Ministry's interpretation assumes Sirius caused the explosion. But Pettigrew is an animagus, rat form. If he needed to disappear and frame Sirius simultaneously, he'd want an explosion large enough to create ambiguity about survivors, with all attention fixed on Sirius, who was visibly present and visibly distressed. She looked at him steadily. And Sirius never had a trial. No trial. No Veritaserum. Sent to Azkaban by ministerial order. That's not a legal conviction under wizarding law. The Wizengamot requires a formal verdict for life imprisonment. A ministerial order covers temporary detention pending trial. They held him without trial for 12 years. She held his gaze. We can challenge it. But only if Sirius Black is alive to benefit from the challenge. Which means we find him before the Ministry does. Scabbers. Harry had suspected it since October. The current read something wrong near Ron's rat. Not a direct identification. The magical signature too diminished in rat form for that. But an environmental wrongness he'd been documenting for weeks. They told Ron together. They gave him evidence rather than asking him to simply believe them. The first 3 minutes were denial, mounted with the fervor of someone who genuinely loved what he was being asked to reframe. The next 4 were the slow, reluctant following of logic that didn't want to be followed. The final 3 were silence. He's been a person this whole time, Ron said finally. While I let him sleep on my bed. He chose to stay, Hermione said. The responsibility for that is his, not yours. How are you this calm? 6 weeks of processing, she said. You'll catch up. The sovereign seal came from the methodology's appendix, the twin current establishing a bounded space in which voluntary magical transformation was suspended. Not a spell. A declaration in the lingua antiqua that had developed naturally between them since the summer before their first year began, the language that lived in the space between them, rather than within either of them alone. They cornered Pettigrew outside the Charms classroom on a Thursday afternoon, when the corridor was briefly empty, and the light was gray from overcast windows. He transformed back to human form because he had no choice. He stood in the corridor looking exactly like the photographs in the Peverell archive, smaller than his reputation, older than those photographs, stripped bare of the performance he'd maintained for 12 years. "Harry," he said. "You are Peter Pettigrew," Harry said. "You are accused under the Peverell arbitration of false witness resulting in wrongful imprisonment. You will be held under sovereign seal pending a formal Wizengamot hearing. He who must not be named Voldemort," Hermione said flatly. "We know who he is. The hearing will determine the legal consequences." She sealed Pettigrew with a word in the lingua antiqua. He could not move. He could not transform. He stood in the corridor and waited. The hearing was held in the Great Hall of Hogwarts on a day in mid-July. Not at the Ministry. Under sovereign arbitration provisions, Hogwarts existed outside Ministry jurisdiction under the Founders' Compact, and Harry had invoked that designation. Neutral ground. The Great Hall at Hogwarts, empty of students. Witnesses, Dumbledore, McGonagall, Snape, 7 Wizengamot members, Ragnarok from Gringotts, and Sirius Black. He'd come because Harry's message through the Peverell Manor Flu Network, a channel that didn't route through Ministry monitoring, said, "We know you didn't do it. We have Pettigrew. Come to Hogwarts." He came in looking thinner than the archive photographs and too large for his own skin. The way people looked when they'd been inside something constraining for years past endurance. He sat at the side of the Great Hall and watched Pettigrew with the stillness of someone who had rehearsed this moment thousands of times and found the reality of it different from every version. He looked at Harry. "You look like James," he said. "I know. You don't sound like him. I know that too. Your mother would have been." He stopped. He held the stop for a moment. "She would have been very pleased." "She was," Harry said. "She left things behind." Sirius looked at him with the focused attention of someone hearing something they haven't prepared for. She prepared. Yes, that's exactly what she would have done. He looked at Hermione. "And you're the other one." "Hermione Granger. I know your name. She wrote you into the plan." He looked between them. "I should have known she would." 12 years of wrongness sat in his voice alongside something that was almost, not quite yet, but almost, relief. Pettigrew's hearing took 37 minutes under Veritaserum. His account of that November night, complete, specific, delivered in the flat register of a man being forced to say true things he'd spent 12 years not saying, was recorded simultaneously by 2 Wizengamot scribes and 1 Gringotts notary. When it was done, Snape, who had watched the entire proceedings from his seat near the staff table with arms folded and face professionally unreadable, caught Harry's eye across the hall. He gave one short, deliberate nod. It communicated what it needed to communicate without requiring words, that whatever agreement they'd reached in the potions dungeon 2 years ago remained in effect, and that this particular outcome was one he'd been quietly hoping for. McGonagall had been crying since the 8th question. She would deny this if asked. Sirius's formal exoneration was filed 3 days later. Dumbledore, who had watched the entire hearing from a seat near the main doors with his hands folded and his face arranged in an expression of professional neutrality, found Harry in the corridor afterward. "I owe you something," he said. "You don't, not an apology. An acknowledgement." He looked at Harry with the directness he'd developed over the past 2 years of working alongside rather than around them. "I made decisions about your life without your knowledge, about what you needed to know and when you needed to know it. I told myself this was protection." He paused. "Your mother, I think, understood better than I did what protection actually requires. She understood what it requires of the person being protected," Harry said. "Not just what it requires of the person doing the protecting." Dumbledore looked at him for a moment. "Yes, precisely that." Harry brought the Lily portrait to the manor. "She's in there," Harry said. Sirius looked at the small portrait for a long moment. "Hello, Lily," he said finally. "Hello, Padfoot," the portrait said. "You're late." "Yeah," he said, and laughed, really laughed. Not the performance of a laugh, but the actual thing, untethered from 12 years of restraint, for what sounded like the first time in a decade. He stayed at the manor. Not because he had nowhere else to go. He had the Black family townhouse, which Dumbledore eventually helped him reclaim, but because the manor felt like the right place to rebuild from. He went back to Grimmauld Place for practicalities and returned to Peverell Manor for everything else. Over the following months, he and Hermione's father Richard had developed an unexpected rapport over a shared interest in Muggle engineering. And Sirius had begun spending Sunday dinners at the Granger's Oxford house, with the slightly dazed quality of someone being readmitted to ordinary domestic life and finding it considerably better than he'd remembered. In the dead of winter of their 3rd year, an arrest warrant arrived at the Hogwarts gates. 2 Aurors, mourning, the formal posture of people executing an assignment they weren't comfortable with. McGonagall brought word to Transfiguration class, with the look of someone managing 2 completely different requirements simultaneously. Ministry representatives at the gate. "An arrest warrant for both of you," she said. "On what grounds?" Hermione asked. "Misappropriation of goblin legal frameworks. Public disruption through exercise of unverified authority. Undue influence on the administration of Hogwarts." She recited this in the tone of someone reading words they found professionally offensive. "I can tell them you're in class. That buys us 40 minutes, Harry said. "I can also tell them that interrupting an ongoing educational session without headmaster authority violates the Educational Standards Charter of 1882. 3 hours, Hermione said. That was my calculation as well. McGonagall returned to the front of the room. As I was saying, the purpose of a switching spell, the counter-filing, took 2 hours and 40 minutes. Hermione had the structure prepared since October, when the currents readings of the political climate had suggested the Ministry was building toward a direct challenge. The text was memorized. The legal citations were catalogued. She drafted the formal invocation in 14 minutes, the counter-challenge in 22. The ICW notifications in 9. Ragnarok dispatched compliance officers before Harry's notification even reached Gringotts. They arrived at the school gates in non-ceremonial armor 14 minutes before Harry and Hermione got there. He anticipated the move, Harry said. We'll need to understand exactly how, Hermione said. The compliance officer's counter-warrant superseded the Ministry arrest warrant on 3 independent grounds, each individually sufficient. The Aurors looked at the documentation, looked at the armor, looked at each other. They left. Cornelius Fudge held a press conference 4 days later. He didn't say they had defeated him. He said there were concerns about 2 Hogwarts students whose claims to historical titles appeared fraudulent, whose influence over the school seemed inappropriate for their age, whose legal maneuvers had interfered with proper Ministry procedure in multiple documented cases. Ron watched it in the common room with them. He's calling you frauds, he said. He's doing it in language, precisely calibrated to be difficult to legally challenge, Hermione said. He's not making a specific false factual claim, he's casting doubt, which requires a different response, such as a hearing, Harry said. The Peverell Compact requires any challenge to be formally adjudicated, not answered with a press conference, adjudicated. If Fudge refuses to respond formally, Compact Article 7 triggers automatically. Review of Ministry authority in any area where it violated the Compact. And for that, Hermione said, we need witnesses who can independently attest to the Compact's legal standing. The room was quiet for a moment. Dumbledore, Ron said. Yes, the conversation happened in Dumbledore's office that evening. The portraits around the walls were awake and watching. Witnesses, rather than audience, a distinction the castle seemed to understand. You need my testimony that the founding compact predates the Ministry's authority and cannot be superseded by Ministry declaration, Dumbledore said. Yes, Hermione said. I have known this since I was 40. It is not a matter of interpretation, it is a matter of magical law. He was quiet for a moment. I have been choosing not to say it publicly because of the consequences that would follow for the Ministry, consequences I was not prepared to take responsibility for. He looked at his hands. Fudge removed that option. If I do not testify, I am implicitly endorsing a legal fraud, which violates the oath I took as Chief Warlock. I cannot endorse a legal fraud. We know, Hermione said. You knew I would arrive here. We thought the political situation would force a choice. We hoped you'd make the right one. He looked at her with the look he used when she'd said something that caught him genuinely off guard. You hoped, he said. Yes, we weren't certain. That is more honest than I expected. We've been trying to be honest with you since September of first year, Harry said. The honesty runs both directions. Yes, Dumbledore said. I will testify. The formal hearing ran 3 days. Dumbledore testified on the second day for 4 hours, presenting 4 Visingamote precedents from within the body's own records that directly contradicted the Ministry's central claim, precedents that had never been formally challenged and were therefore binding. The Ministry's council had no response. The ruling came on day 3. The Ministry held no authority over the sovereign heirs in matters pertaining to their lordships or recognized exercises of sovereign authority. The Regency Protocol was established. The sovereign pretender category was null and void. Fudge found Harry in a corridor afterward. A boy your age shouldn't have to be burdened with all this legality, he said. My age didn't matter when Voldemort tried to kill me. My age didn't matter when Dumbledore decided not to tell me the full prophecy. I'm not interested in my age being used as a reason to take me less seriously. Harry held his gaze. But I'm not your enemy. Hermione and I want the Ministry to function. I think you could be better at it, if you decided to try. Fudge was quiet for a long moment. You are a very unusual young man, he said. I know. I'm working on it. The goblet of fire burned blue-white in the entrance hall on the eve of Halloween of their 4th year. Harry studied it on the first day with the current's full attention. The goblet was not sentient, not alive, but it had been built with enough accumulated purpose that the purpose itself functioned like intention. It had its own loyalty, to its original charter, not to Bagman's announcements. It'll accept the joint entry, he told Hermione that evening. I know. The Ministry's version of the tournament rules restricts submissions to 1 per school, but the Goblet's original mandate recognized any legitimate magical institution's representation. It was written 3 centuries before the Ministry existed. She looked at the relevant clause in the founding documents. We submit tonight, before anyone thinks to restrict the terms. At midnight, the entrance hall empty, Hermione placed a single piece of parchment on the goblet's flame, both names, the dyadic designation's full documentation, and the precise founding charter clause authorizing joint representation. The goblet took it without hesitation. The blue-white flame didn't change. But the current registered something, old magic acknowledging what it had received. The selection happened on Halloween evening. Crumb from Durmstrang, Fleur Delacour from Beauxbatons, who accepted her selection with the composure of someone who'd known it was coming. Cedric Diggory from Hogwarts, who stood with a surprised, genuine smile, the kind that meant he hadn't assumed, which immediately distinguished him from most of the people around him. Then the flame went gold-white, a different color entirely, the color of very old magical recognition, and a 4th parchment emerged. Dumbledore read it. His expression moved through something Harry had never seen on it, genuine surprise, recognition, and the calculation of someone whose frameworks had just been exceeded. Harry Potter and Hermione Granger. Submitted as the dyadic pair, joint entry, under Tournament Clause 7 of the founding articles. In the champion's tent afterward, Karkaroff performed outrage with professional skill. Madame Maxime performed careful observation. Bagman performed enthusiasm while visibly improvising. Cedric Diggory stood near the tent entrance and looked at Harry with uncomplicated curiosity. Joint entry, he said. How does that work in the actual tasks? We're going to find out, Harry said. Cedric smiled. Honest answer. He paused. Good luck. Victor Krum had been watching Harry and Hermione since the selection with the focused attention of someone whose understanding of magic had just encountered something that didn't fit its categories. Not impossibly. The current had a quality that felt almost familiar even to people who'd never heard the term, like something that should exist. Recognized for the first time, he approached after the official proceedings ended. The entry, he said carefully. It was not 2 entries. It was 1 entry with 2 names. Yes, Harry said. This I have not seen in competition. It hasn't been seen in 3 centuries, Hermione said. Krum nodded slowly, processing. I would like to watch how you approach the tasks, he said. If that is acceptable. You're welcome to watch, Harry said. The first task was dragons. The Hungarian horntail, most aggressive of the 4, Harry suspected assigned deliberately, was guarding a clutch of eggs that had been transported without adequate temperature regulation. The current read her aggression as pain, a creature defending what she believed was endangered. She's not attacking, Harry said before they went in. She's protecting. The nesting platform temperature, Hermione said. I can adjust it from outside the arena while you address her directly. What the arena expected was a spectacle. What it received was different. Harry spoke to the horntail in Parseltongue, not commanding, acknowledging, recognizing what she was doing and why she was doing it. The current bridged the language gap enough for tone to carry where words couldn't fully reach. Hermione adjusted the platform temperature from outside the barrier, precisely, by the specific amount the diagnostic site identified. The horntail stopped charging. She watched Harry. He picked up the golden egg. The arena went completely silent. Then the Beauxbatons delegation made a sound that was too startled to be organized applause, but too enthusiastic to be anything else. Fleur Delacour, watching from the champions area, shook her head slowly with an expression that suggested she was revising several assumptions simultaneously. Cedric caught Harry's eye and gave him one short, respectful nod. Krum, in the Durmstrang section, had leaned forward and not leaned back. The second task was the lake. They agreed on the configuration after some argument. Harry would speak to the water directly. Hermione would anchor from shore. Her diagnostic sight read differently in aquatic environments, shallower range, different calibration, and the anchoring from above the water extended their combined reach beyond what full submersion would allow. He came back in 31 minutes with all 4 hostages. Ron, gasping and already making jokes about seaweed. Hermione's parents, who had been introduced to the scope of what their daughter was involved in over the course of several careful dinners, and had responded with the equanimity of people whose trust in her judgment was not theoretical. And a small girl named Gabrielle, who surfaced sputtering and immediately gripped Harry's shoulder. Fleur Delacour reached the bank seconds later, still pulling herself from the water. "Gabrielle," she said, and then stopped when she saw her sister already wrapped in a Gringotts compliance officer's cloak, entirely fine. She looked at Harry. "Thank you," she said. It came out simply. "She's fine," Harry said. "A bit cold." Fleur looked at Hermione on the bank. "You watched from the shore the entire time." "Someone had to hold the other end," Hermione said. Fleur was quiet. "Then, this bond, it is not something taught." "No," Hermione said. "It isn't. The third task was the maze. They moved through it together because the maze's core premise, that isolation was the condition to exploit, was simply not available. Every obstacle designed to confuse or separate a lone champion encountered something the design hadn't accounted for. 2 people who were better at reading environments together than either was alone. 47 minutes. The previous record had been 2 hours and 12 minutes. Hermione's diagnostic sight read the Triwizard Cup from 30 meters away. Portkey. Modified after placement. Destination changed to Little Hangleton. A graveyard. She looked at him. Someone rerouted it. "Barty Crouch Jr., Harry said. "I've been reading his signatures in the castle since October." She transmitted the architectural map of the Cup's destination matrix through the current. Not in words, but in direct spatial knowledge. Harry receiving it the way the bond transmitted anything significant, as direct understanding rather than translation. "On our terms," he said. "On our terms," she confirmed. They touched the cup together. The graveyard resolved around them, cold, dark, the Riddle family grave, the cauldron, Pettigrew moving in firelight. All of it prepared for a version of this moment where Harry arrived alone. Disoriented, afraid. "Hello, Peter," Harry said. Pettigrew turned. The expression on his face moved through several layers quickly. Topmost, surprise. Beneath it, the horror of someone whose plan had been built around a specific variable arriving in a completely different state than expected. Beneath that, the recognition that the plan was already finished. "He who must not be named," he began. "We tracked the Portkey modification 3 weeks ago," Hermione said. "We've been waiting to understand the full scope of the plan before acting." She reached into her bag. "Gringotts compliance has been notified of this location." 4 minutes. The ritual did not proceed. Voldemort remained what he had been since October of 1981. A fragment, incomplete. A persistence rather than a presence. The compliance officers arrived in 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Cedric Diggory, watching from the champions area back at Hogwarts as they walked out of the maze calm and unhurried, the cup abandoned on the grass, would say afterward that he'd understood in that moment that the tournament hadn't gone the way anyone had planned, and that this was, on balance, A considerably better outcome. The systematic removal of the Horcruxes had begun in their 5th year. The diary had been first, already destroyed by the time they understood what it was. The diadem they'd found in the 7th floor room of requirement, hidden there since the time of the founders, using the methodology's diagnostic sight to identify the object's wrong presence signature among the centuries of accumulated clutter. The locket had been in a cave on the Scottish coast, reached with Dumbledore, who had by that point settled into his role in the collaboration with the graceful dignity of someone who'd been outmaneuvered by his own conscience and was genuinely fine with it. He navigated the cave's elaborate protections. Harry and Hermione performed the anima exectio, the excision technique Lily's journal had described theoretically, and they'd spent 2 years making practical. "It always feels the same," Harry said after the locket, sitting on the cave's damp stone floor. "Like something that was supposed to be a person." "It was supposed to be a soul," Hermione said, writing in her documentation by wandlight. "And it became a fragment. The feeling you're describing is the residue, the anger of the act that created it. Not the fragment's anger, the act's, Riddle's anger. Yes, each removal, the will conversion, absorbing the fragment's energy, you're taking what he broke and converting it." She looked up, making fuel from what he damaged. Dumbledore had watched this from near the cave entrance. Afterward, he sat beside Harry on the cold stone for a moment. "She built the conversion technique," he said. "Your mother. I knew she was working on something in those last months. I didn't know it was this. You knew she was building towards something. I knew she was frightened and very intelligent and doing something more than simply surviving." He looked at the locket. "I underestimated the scope of what she built." "Everyone did," Harry said, "including Voldemort." Dumbledore looked at him. "Yes, including me, I'm afraid." He paused. "She would be very proud of you. I want you to know that I believe that." "I know," Harry said. "She told me." The cup had been at Gringotts, in the Lestrange vault, retrieved with Ragnarok's cooperation and the Peverell Lordship Authority granting vault access review rights under the compact's terms. Ragnarok had made the arrangements with the particular satisfaction of a goblin director, honoring something he'd been waiting over a decade to honor. The cup's shard had been angrier than the locket, more recent, more coherent, still carrying something that flinched at the light. Early in the summer before their 6th year, the scar had been quiet for 8 months. Harry reported this to Hermione at the library table with the directness they'd developed for current related observations over years of practice, stated, then discussed. No preamble. The graveyard interception was his most developed reconstitution attempt since 1981, she said. Losing it set him back considerably. And the Horcrux removals are contributing. Each removal changes the architecture of what remains. 4 down. The locket, the cup, the diadem, the diary. He looked at her documentation. 3 remaining. Nagini, the ring, and the scar. She met his eyes. We handle them in order. Nagini required 4 months of preparation. The preparation was Hermione's, developing an adaptation of the anima exectio that could operate within a living consciousness without damaging the host. The methodology's appendix contained a partial theoretical framework from the 17th century, incomplete but sufficient to build from. She spent 4 months building from it. The execution was both of them together, as every significant working had been, Hermione's diagnostic sight mapping the architecture, Harry's parcel tongue providing the bridge of consent. "There is something inside you that was put there without your consent," Harry said when they found her. Nagini was very still. "I know," she said. "I can feel it through the language. It's been there since before I was born, since my master put it there. He was not good to you. No, I can remove it. It requires that you hold still, that you don't resist what it feels like when something is taken out." A silence. "Will it hurt?" she asked. "I don't know. I've done this to objects, never to something living. You tell me the truth. Always, in this language. She held still. Do it! The excision took 11 minutes. The fragment left with the same sound as the others. The register of something wrongly separated, something that had never wanted to be divided from itself. Harry absorbed it. The conversion carried the old fury, which was the anger not of the fragment itself, but of the act that had created it. When it was done, Nagini lay in the grass for a long moment. "It is different," she said. Yes, I did not know how different until now. She lay still a while longer. Then she moved, not fleeing, not rushing, simply moving, with the deliberate quality of something learning its own shape without a weight it had carried for too long. She didn't look back. The ring came from the gaunt house with Dumbledore, who navigated the site's defenses and waited outside while Harry and Hermione performed the Anima Exectio in the derelict building's main room. The resurrection stone set into the ring was handled carefully. It was his family's, whatever Riddle had tried to make it into. The ring's fragment was the quietest of all 6, almost resigned. The scar was the 7th. They performed the final excision at Peverell Manor on a morning in early summer, not at Hogwarts, because the manor was home, and the third prophecy had been clear that the twin current's full expression required a grounded environment. 5 years of their work was held in these walls. Harry sat in the library. Hermione sat across from him. "Tell me the procedure again," he said. "Complete stillness, physical and magical. Will magic present but passive? Receptive, not active or resistant?" She set her hands on the table. The Ravenclaw Le ring caught the morning light. "I'll map the fragment using the diagnostic site first. You'll feel it entering your magical core. It won't hurt, but you'll feel it. I know what the diagnostic site feels like. Not from inside your own core. No, tell me if something feels wrong." "Hermione, I know. You trust me. I was going to say I know you'll do it correctly." She was quiet for a moment. "Exercise 23, she said. "Certainty is a position about the future. Trust is a position about a person. Yes, I am certain about the procedure. I trust you to be still. Begin." The diagnostic site entering his magical core had no language. It was the feeling of being understood at the level below words, not the understanding of the methodology exercises, but something deeper. The level at which the twin current had always operated, the level his mother had been reaching toward in her unfinished sentence. Hermione worked in complete silence. He felt the mapping, her diagnostic site tracing the architecture of his magical core, locating the fragment, identifying its binding tethers with the precision she brought to everything that required precision. The fragment was there. He had known it was there for 5 years, had felt it as the scar's intermittent readings. The Voldemort quality the current sometimes registered through his own architecture. Older than everything else in him, older than the bond, older than the first morning at Gringotts. It had been there since he was 1 year old. "I have it," Hermione said. He held still. She made the cut. The fragment lifted the way the others had. The same sound, the same register of wrongful separation expressing what it had no other way to express. But this one was different in one quality, not angry. Exhausted, 17 years inside a living consciousness had worn the fury down to something that wanted, in the only way it could want anything, to stop. He absorbed it. The conversion was the quietest of all 7. The exhaustion transmuting not into power but into the absence of what had been there. Not a loss, a restoration. His scar did not hurt. His scar had never, in all his memory, not hurt. He sat in the library's warmth and felt the arrival of a silence he hadn't known existed, the absence of something he'd carried since before he had memory, which he'd simply accepted as part of himself without knowing it was not. "Oh," he said. "Yes," Hermione said. "It's quiet." He touched his forehead. Not the scar, just above it. Feeling the absence. I've been carrying that since I was 1 year old. She looked at him with the steady, open quality of someone the current was transmitting to directly. I know, she said. You felt it leave. Yes, through the bond. He looked at the library around him, the warmth of a place built for comfort rather than display, the garden visible through the windows, the books on the shelves that held his parents' annotations and his mother's planning. 7, he said. 7, what's left of him now? A mortal man, one unanchored soul, nothing to return to, no anchor remaining, nothing extending his life beyond its natural end. He knows something has been happening. He's felt each removal as a loss without understanding what was being taken. He doesn't know what. She closed the documentation. He's going to come. When he understands, there's nothing left to wait for. Yes, she looked at him across the table. We'll be ready. We've been ready. We'll be more ready. He looked at her. The third prophecy. What it said about the end. The bond between shall be the world's suture, she said from memory. Not a weapon. A form of healing. What we did today. What we've been doing since that first morning at Gringotts. Outside the library window, the garden was working at something, the rose bush still 3 inches from where it wanted to be, still negotiating with itself after 5 years of consideration. Somewhere, a man who had never understood what could exist between two people was preparing for his last attempt. He came in autumn. He came with his followers and his absolute certainty that whatever had been eroding his power over the past 6 years was something he could still overcome, that he had enough left to finish what 1981 had interrupted. He came to Peverell Manor because the current's signature had been readable to him as a dim, persistent irritation for months, and the manor was where it was strongest, and he had finally decided that what irritated him most needed to be ended. He found 2 people standing together on the hillside outside the manor in the early morning, composed, unhurried, with the particular quality of people who had been expecting this moment and had spent 6 years preparing for it. Voldemort looked at them both and felt, for the first time in his very long life, something that was almost uncertainty. He cast anyway. The killing curse struck the twin current. It did not break. It did not deflect in the way a shield deflects. Shields absorb force and redirect it, and force was not what the current was. The current absorbed the curse the way understanding absorbs a misconception, not by pushing back, but by receiving, processing, and incorporating. The same mechanism that had absorbed 7 Horcrux fragments over 6 years. The same force that had been building since August of 1991 in a kitchen in Oxford and a bank beneath London and a train compartment moving through the English countryside. The twin current was not a form of power. It was a form of knowing. And what it knew, what it had always known, was how to exist in the space between 2 people in ways that Voldemort could not reach, because he had never once in his entire life occupied that space voluntarily. Every relationship he had ever had was a form of extraction. Every connection was a transaction. The space between people that existed purely in the giving of oneself to another, that space was genuinely foreign to him, not strategically avoided, but categorically inaccessible. The way colorblindness makes certain distinctions invisible. He had aimed at something he couldn't see. The curse reflected, not with drama, with precision, the way things ended when the conditions that had sustained them were no longer present. Tom Riddle died on a hillside in the early autumn of their 17th year, in a body with no anchors left, with no one who mourned him, because he had spent his entire life ensuring that no one ever got close enough to mourn him. His followers scattered, then stopped. Several sat down on the hillside grass with the expressions of people who had been moving toward something for a long time and had arrived at the absence where it used to be. Harry stood in the morning light and felt the scar go completely, permanently, beautifully quiet. It's done, he said. Hermione stood beside him, notebook already open. Yes, she said. He looked at her. Are you documenting this right now? Yes, we just ended. I know exactly what we just did, she said. That's precisely why I'm documenting it. She looked up at him. Your mother would want us to. He looked at the notebook. He thought of Lily Potter at 21, writing in careful script by lamplight, planning for 2 children she might never get to meet, building frameworks she wouldn't live to use. Yes, he said, she would. Hermione wrote for another moment. Then she looked at the hillside, the morning, the clear autumn sky where the last traces of a decades-long fear were dispersing like fog. Breakfast, she said. Sirius made scones. He always makes scones. He learned from Dumbledore. He thinks no one knows. Everyone knows, she said. Yes, he looked at the manor. Everyone knows. They walked back together through the autumn morning, and the garden had finally moved the rose bush 3 inches to the left while no one was watching. It had taken 5 years of quiet renegotiation. It had gotten there. 26 years later, on the first morning of September, their son James stood on platform 9 3/4 and looked at the Hogwarts Express with the expression of someone standing at the beginning of something enormous. He held a book against his chest, not to read, as an anchor. A comprehensive introduction to sovereign magic history, read 3 times since July. The spine already cracked at 2 chapters on prophetic designation law and 1 chapter on the Gringotts Compact that he'd read so many times the pages had gone slightly soft. Lily, at 14, had already boarded. She'd kissed her parents and walked through the barrier without looking back. Not from indifference, but from the particular confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was going toward. She'd been self-documenting her experiences of the current's influence since age 11 and a half, when she'd realized that what she felt in her parents' presence was different from what other people described feeling around their families, and had asked her mother about it with the same directness her mother had always brought to everything. "Explain it to me like I'm a researcher," Lily had said. "You are a researcher," Hermione had said. "So I'll explain it like one." That notebook was on its 3rd volume. Sirius, who had come to the platform despite it being, as he put it, an unreasonable hour for anyone who wasn't 11, was standing near the barrier with a paper bag of scones he'd made at 5 in the morning and a thermos of tea, which he was distributing to families around him with the easy generosity of someone who had spent 26 years learning that abundance was something you made rather than something you waited to receive. He had also given a scone to a small Ravenclaw girl who was crying near the barrier and didn't have any parents visible, and had located her parents within 4 minutes by the simple method of asking everyone nearby. Harry crouched to James's level. "The hat is going to find the current," he said. "The twin current," James said. "Yes, when the hat makes contact, you'll feel it register. Something very old recognizing what it is. Don't be afraid of it. It's been with you your whole life. The hat will simply be the first thing outside the family that names it. Does it name it? Not in those words. But you'll know what it found." James looked at the train. He held the book a little tighter. "Dad, what if I'm just me? What were you going to say?" "Not extraordinary, just myself." Harry looked at his son. Brown eyes that were Hermione's color, directness that was his own. The book held like a life preserver against something large and uncertain, and underneath the nervousness, he could feel it through the current's ambient influence on James, not the designation itself, but its long proximity. A quality that was not his or Hermione's, but entirely James's own. A steadiness that came from having grown up in a household where thinking carefully and feeling deeply were treated as the same skill. "James, I grew up in a cupboard under a staircase being told I was nothing. Your mother grew up being told she was too much. Neither of those things were true." He put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Whatever kind of magic is yours, it's already yours. It already exists. Right now. The castle will show you its shape. But it's been there your whole life, whether you're extraordinary or ordinary, or somewhere in between. James considered this with the seriousness he brought to everything that mattered. "Okay," he said. The whistle blew. He looked back once, just once, acknowledging that what he was leaving was real, and that what he was going toward was also real, and that holding both things simultaneously was not a contradiction, but a capacity he'd grown up watching his parents practice every day. Then he turned and walked through the door, and was gone. The train moved. Hermione's hand found Harry's on the platform in the way it had found it 10,000 times, not reaching, arriving, the way things arrived when they'd been coming for 26 years. They stood together until the express took the bend and disappeared, the engine's steam dispersing into the September air above the empty platform. Sirius appeared at Harry's left shoulder and offered him a scone. "How many did you make?" Harry asked. 22. I lost count around the 14th and kept going. He looked at where the train had been. "He'll be all right." "I know," Harry said. "He's got your mother's focus and Hermione's precision and something entirely his own that I don't have a name for yet." Sirius bit into his scone. "Give it a term at Hogwarts. It'll name itself." They stood on the emptying platform in the September morning, and Harry thought about a woman he'd only ever known through journals and portraits and the system she'd built to outlast herself, and about two 11-year-olds meeting outside a bank 26 years ago, and about a sentence that hadn't been finished and a methodology built to finish it. 26 years, he said, from that first morning at Gringotts. Your mother's unfinished sentence. I believe the twin current is not a form of power but a form of knowing. She looked at where the train had been. "We finished it." "Yes," he said, "we did." She glanced at him sideways. "You're thinking about something, the methodology, what it actually was, underneath all the documentation and exercises and volumes of notes. Tell me, your mother's question, the one she couldn't finish." And the methodology was the process of answering it, not theoretically, but practically. Not knowing about each other, knowing each other. The distinction matters. Yes, she was quiet for a moment. The designation gave us the framework. The methodology gave us the practice. What we put into it, what we built between us, that was ours. Not the designations. The designation is the instrument. We are what we played. That's a better metaphor than tuning forks. I'll update the documentation. You don't have to document everything. I know. A pause. I want to. Sirius looked between them with the expression he'd been wearing for 26 years whenever this happened. The look of someone in the presence of something working exactly as it was supposed to work, and finding it still genuinely remarkable. They walked back through the barrier together, back into the ordinary world that had no knowledge of twin currents or prophetic designations or a goblin director who had kept faith with a dead woman's plans for nearly 3 decades. Back to the manor, where Ragnar's letter for James sat on the kitchen table, one sentence, written in the deliberate script of someone who had been waiting a very long time to write it. "We have been waiting for your family since the age of Merlin. It has been a privilege." Back to the library, where the methodology was now in its 5th volume, and the rosebush was finally, permanently, in the right light. Back to the life built in the space between two people who had spent 26 years paying close attention to each other, not the designation, not the rings or the legal architecture, or the Regency Protocol, or the 7 Horcruxes, or the Dark Wizard, who had never understood what existed in the space between two people who genuinely knew each other. The knowledge itself, that being fully known was the most powerful thing in the world. That it couldn't be taken, hoarded, weaponized, or used against someone. That it lived in the giving and the receiving simultaneously, in the willingness to be seen clearly rather than strategically, in the accumulation of small, accurate knowings into something larger than any single act of understanding. that it was available to anyone willing to do the cartography. 2 tuning forks, the air between them, already vibrating, always had been. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.